For this session, I wrote 59 words. For this session, I wrote 139 words, and my week's total word count is 861 words. But even all of this, analyzed and studied, still could not fully explain Cincinnatus. It was as if one side of his being slid into another dimension, as all the complexity of a tree's foliage passes from shade into radiance, so that you cannot distinguish just where begins the submergence into the shimmer of a different element. It seemed as though at any moment, in the course of his movements about the limited space of the haphazardly invented cell, Cincinnatus would step in such a way as to slip naturally and effortlessly through some chink of the air into its unknown coulisses, to disappear there with the same easy smoothness with which the flashing reflection of a rotated mirror moves across every object in the room and suddenly vanishes, as if beyond the air in some new depth of ether. At the same time, everything about him breathed with a delicate, drowsy, but in reality exceptionally strong, ardent, and independent life. Yet he overcame the pages with a melancholy feeling, plodded through the pages with dull distress, and kept drowning out the tale in the stream of his own meditation. What matters to me, all this, distant, deceitful, and dead, I, who am preparing to die? He realized that this fear was dragging him precisely into that false logic of things that had gradually developed around him, but from which he had still somehow been able to escape that morning. The very thought that this chubby, red-cheeked hunter was going to hack at him was already an inadmissible, sickening weakness, drawing Cincinnatus into a system that was perilous to him. He fully understood all this, but, like a man unable to resist arguing with a hallucination, even though he knows perfectly well that the entire masquerade is staged in his own brain, Cincinnatus tried in vain to outwrangle his fear, despite his understanding that he ought actually to rejoice at the awakening whose proximity was presaged by barely noticeable phenomena, by the peculiar effects on everyday implements, by a certain general instability, by a certain flaw in all visible matter. But the sun was still realistic, the world still held together, objects still observed an outward propriety. Those were some of my favorite passages toward the end of Invitation to a Beheading by Vladimir Nabokov, which I finished last week. I uphold my previous take that this is a book on writing, an emphatic metaphor on writing. This book is beautifully written, and in my opinion, it's not super dark. It is a bit eccentric, actually quite eccentric, given that it is rather surrealistic, but one of the most astounding reads to date, and this is definitely one of my new favorite books. It is an inspiration for me in my current primary manuscript, which is of the labyrinthine surrealistic genre. I think there's so much that can be learned and studied from this book. Nabokov truly is a master prose stylist, as indicated in the back of this book, and I am just in love with this book. In this book, there is a comparison of Nabokov's Invitation to Beheading to Kafka's The Castle, and Nabokov himself disagrees with the comparison. He says, I don't know how people are relating my work to Kafka. And I would agree. I don't think that Kafka and Nabokov read the same, at least for me. Personally, I am not a Kafka fan, and that is a controversial take. But in my opinion, I feel that Kafka reads like an irritated younger brother, and this reads like tormented writer who might be spiraling, but not totally toward demise and depravity. I think the conclusion in this book is rather positive, and overall I feel that this is a very balanced book that juggles well the heavy themes of the burdens of being a writer and mixed in with some dry humor. This really isn't a plot-based book, in my opinion. I feel that the simple plotline exists solely as a backdrop or a canvas to express the agony of writing, of being a writer. Personally, I'm not interested all that much in plot-based books. I find those kinds of structures to be a little overcooked. I've always preferred the more poetic side of literature. So if that's what you're interested in, I think this would be a great read. There are so many nuggets of gold in this book, and as you can see, I have dog-eared so many of its pages for reference. 2 new additions to my library. I needed some quiet domestic fiction, so I picked up Elizabeth Gaskell's Wives and Daughters. And then I made my own copy of a book in the public domain. I wanted my own cover for it, and I wanted to keep the original print, but I didn't want to read it online. And this finally came in the mail for me. It took such a long time to arrive, but it is the Doctrine and Literature of the Kabbalah by A.E. Waite. And this one actually turned out pretty nice. The pixelation it's actually decent, whereas my History of Magic was terrible. So now I'm gonna get to my writing session, and then when I have that done, I will insert the clip at the end, and that'll be it for this vlog. For this session, I wrote 105 words.